Carry on assembling this shutter. I think it might be easier to do the next part with this flash contact out. I'm just checking to see if that's the case. So what do I need to put in here? The standoff goes in here. That supports the plate that runs across here. This must go there. Our 1/500th of a second speed extra spring goes in here. And I should be able to fit this plate in position. To go under the 500th of a second speed spring. Drops in position there. This arm has to be pulled back slightly. I'm just going to put this screw in here to hold things loosely in position. This arm should come out because it should be against the edge of that plate like that. That's better. That should be forward, that's better. That's sitting fairly flush. Will this flash contact drop into place now? That tucked under the edge of that. Yes, it did. That's our flash contact here. Now that arm's on the wrong side. Let's bring that back. That's better. Put the retaining screw in for the flash contact. This plate seems to be sitting fine. Now, before we put the sync lever for changing the flash sync speeds in, there's a spring that goes in here underneath this 500th per second spring. Goes around the post at that point and tucks into the hole. There it is at that point. A sync speed lever. Making sure the bush, there's a post or a bush underneath here, making sure that the screw is lined up with that, passes through it. That's better. Get that screw started. I'm not screwing it down hard because I've got to lift that spring out from underneath it and over the edge of the post, so it's working on the correct side of this little boss here. Lift that up a bit more, give myself a little bit more space. This is hard on your tweezers. Oh, just about had it then. Lift it over to the other side of that lever. That's it. It's on the right side of that boss, so I can do that screw up slightly, make sure the lever is centered on the shouldered screw. Make sure that lever flips smoothly. Checks this lever is moving correctly. That looks good. No stiffness there. No, that's good. That part looks good. Okay. Now, putting the other parts in, they're best put in a certain order. And I think that our shutter release lever should probably go in next. I'll check that that screws tight. It is. Shutter release lever fits into the shutter there. And the end, this spring, this ugly, twisty looking spring, has to come around and hook onto the top of this little lever here, this little stud there. And it's best done in this order, because if we put the B lever on first, we'll never be able to get the thing lined up correctly. What am I looking for? A bit of molybdenum paste. Just put some in a couple of spots in the shutter. Here, where the bird paw on the main lever runs. Here, where the speed setting cam controls the pallets at that end. Here, where the main lever pulls that lever across. That'll do. And the main lever, a quick wipe around the inside edge, the outside edge, paying particular attention here. That's where the shutter is held open. On that tab there, point of the bird paw, that's ready to go. So that should slide in underneath. Got to get the spring hooked up to the post here, so I need it slid in underneath there. Of course it wants to, doesn't want to go around the corner, it wants to disappear down the hole in the body instead. Going to pull back this little lever here so that it clears. That's the lever that sets the self timer or delay action. Pull back the pallet lever there. Check that the bird paw is correctly positioned. Now that spring should be underneath this plate, and it's not. Why is it not? That's better. I'm going to lift the end of that spring up onto this post. Like that. Check that the lever moves freely, and it does. This is deeply suspicious when things go this smoothly. The B lever goes on here. It's held in place with a single screw. Let's screw down, check the lever moves freely, it does, and then swing its spring into position. And its spring comes round to this post. There's a little notch in that post that the spring lodges in. That looks good. We have our latch over here that needs to be dealt to. And how does this go? I never remember. Oh yeah, this goes this way. The spring needs to tuck down into the body. There's our lever tucked down into position. That's better. The small lever that sits on top of it sits in here. Get that through underneath. There's a spring here I'm desperately trying not to dislodge. I don't want anything flying across the room at this late stage. And that's screwed down. Now this spring I'll have to bring round and it connects up. There's this little lever here. There's a tiny slot in the side of it. This spring needs to come around and lodge into that slot. It's trying to get off that post. That's it. That's correct. That looks good enough to test. So taking our speed setting cam, I'll run some molybdenum paste around the contact surfaces. Particular interest up here where the 500th of a second spring runs, because that creates quite a bit of friction. That plate should drop in. It does. Now that's in the B position at the moment. Let's see if it works. The shutter cocked. Oh, that was the self-timer running down. That appears to work. We'll just put it on another speed. Let's try. What's that? A tenth? That's a tenth. Try it on both flash sync speeds. Yeah, the shutter's working correctly. On the B setting, that works fine. Let's turn it around somewhere and try the self-timer. The self-timer is set by holding back this button as you cock the shutter. Like that. You can hear the self-timer running down. That's good. I'm quite happy with that. Put the cover back in place and that bayonet's into position. And we have our lock screw here. It's like a half screw that you rotate to lock in position. Stop that thing from coming loose. That seems to be very good. Alright, well I'll check the speeds of that on my shutter tester, but providing they're okay, I can carry on and close that up. Alright, time to put the cleaned lenses back into the shutter. Start with the rear grip. Friction tool. Tighten that up, that's good. The centre group. Again, I'll use a friction tool. Blow any dust away. The front group, I'll get that started. Yes, that's going in nice and smoothly. So I'll back it out to expose the threads and put a little bit of grease on there. Use a little bit of synthetic grease and put a little dot in half a dozen places around that thread. That should do, and work that in. It's a multi-start thread, it's quite a steep pitch. I'd like to say that was dead smooth, but it's not, but it's adequate. So with the focus scale ring on the front, that should be fine. At the rear of the shutter we have the shim. Just clean this. Will it drop straight over that screw, or does the screw have to be loosened up? See, loosen that screw up. Turn that, do the screw back up. Okay, that holds the shim in place. That's going nowhere. So that shutter's ready to go back into the camera body. It's the focus scale ring here, I'll give that a quick clean. Won't set the focus scale ring back on there until the focus has been adjusted correctly. I'll use a ground glass screen to adjust the focus. And then that'll go on, and there's just 3 small screws around the outside, tighten it in place. The next stage is to just clean the camera body. So here I'm just checking inside the front of the camera, making sure there's no sand or grit or anything serious in there. Everything appears to work quite smoothly here. Now the top cover and the viewfinder, I want to clean that. So I think I should start. There's obviously a collar around the shutter release. There's probably something under the film advance knob. I'll undo that screw, lift off the film advance knob. Yes, 2 screws. Two things need to do under here, well 3 really. Clean up the viewfinder, obviously, it's probably dusty. Lubricate the film advance, and also there's an interlock in here for the shutter release. Got to make sure that's all clean and functioning correctly. Now this collar, somebody has already put a huge scratch across the top cover there, slipping with a tool. It is quite tight. I'll probably use a tool like this to get that loose. I think I'll find the right tips. Just going to use this tool, hopefully, to loosen that collar. Yes, that was ideal. That retaining collar off. The top cover may now just lift off, if we're very lucky. No, not a sausage. Okay, I'll try underneath the flash shoe. There's a single screw there which may hold things down. They do. There's our top cover, front lens, rear lens, nothing else in there. Should be easy to clean. Here's our mechanism for locking or unlocking the shutter release. Here's the indicator to show whether the shutter is cocked or not. There's the setting lever for the finder adjustment to show the field of view for 6x9, 4x6. And there's two settings there for 4x6, one at. There's also windows here show you the parallax correction at infinity or at 1 metre, either using 6x9 or 4x6. Just looking at that, is there any timing I need to be aware of there? It doesn't look like it. Does that lift off? It doesn't. That must be fixed from the base. This lifts off. Alright, that gives me access to these parts here, and this particular camera, all this is very clean. It's not, of course, not at all uncommon for there to be lots of sand and grit and other rubbish under the top cover, but this looks good. Let's lift that button off. That's clean too. I've displaced that spring, that needs to sit around there. The shutter release button, it looks okay. Bit of sticky grease down here. That's got a return spring on it, that looks fine. I'll just clean that grease away. Plunger for the shutter release, I'm just cleaning that. It's a two-piece arrangement. The inner, which of course would get pushed down by either the shutter release button or the cable release if you're using a cable release. And the button itself. There's a flat on one side of that button. At this arm, what does that lock to? Nothing. But there's a slot across here, like something would originally have sat there and stopped this button from rotating. There's nothing to stop the button from rotating. Oh, here it is. A small sliver of metal sits in the back here. Stops the shutter release button from rotating. So of course you can screw in your cable release. That's simple. That's the button for opening the front of the camera. And the collar from the top of the shutter release, a bit dirty. Of course that's threaded on, so I need to make sure the threads are relatively clean, because obviously someone had to fight with that at some stage. Well, that all looks very good. Just make sure that's all clean. Clean the direction arrows that are visible in the little window. They're a bit grubby. Check that that action's smooth. That feels good. It's a bit odd. The bend in this is a bit strange. It may have been made to help align those images correctly. Oh, that's good. The arrow points comes exactly where you'd expect to find it in that window. So